There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store, or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today. I'm sure a lot of you guys remember the old ceremonial hunting tradition of eating the heart out of the first animal you kill. Meat from those organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. You can get those same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil. Find out more at heartandsoil.co. And remember, use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase.
Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast, your home for deer hunting news, stories, and strategies. And now, your host, Mark Kenyon.
Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast. I'm your host, Mark Kenyon, and this is episode number 284. And today in the show, we are exploring how to prepare like a pro for the upcoming hunting season by hearing from expert DIY bow hunter Andy May on the archery, scouting, stand site, and mental planning preparations he executes each summer. Okay, so real quick, before we get into this discussion, we do need to quickly thank onX for their support of this podcast. onX is the creator of the onX Hunt app, which is the mobile mapping tool I use for all of my hunting adventures. I use it all spring and summer as I scout and plan hunting locations, and then I'm using it all fall as I'm hunting and marking various locations, navigating private land and public land borders, all that kind of stuff. It's almost always in use for me, no matter what time of year. So highly recommend it. Head on over to the mobile app store of your choice or visit onxmaps.com to learn more. All right, welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast, brought to you by onX. And today I'm sitting here in my home office in person with my buddy Andy May. Andy, thanks for making the drive over here.
Hey, no problem, man. Happy to do it.
We're going to try to get out and shoot our bows and do some stuff like that. It's just been raining and crappy, as it's been almost for the last 3 months. So figured this would be a good opportunity, though, to chat about some stuff. And I thought we could chat about some stuff that's particularly relevant to a little series that I've been running here on the podcast. And I think you've heard some of those episodes, right?
Yeah.
About kind of all the different habits or practices or routines or training regimens that are helping people achieve excellence in other fields and how those things might be able to apply to what we're doing here as hunters. So we study, or we talk to a guy who's an Olympic free skier. We talk to an author who's studying these types of things across athletics and business and art and all sorts of things. And we're going to continue to talk to some different people here in the coming weeks. But I thought today we might be able to do a really nice tie-in. So take those ideas, tie it into something that's super relevant to deer hunting, which is how do you take all those things and put them into action in the summer, right? It's June right now. We're in like that, at least for me. I don't know how it is for you, but I feel like when you hit to June, it's like the final countdown now leading up to hunting season. For some reason, those 3 months leading up to September seem like, okay, you better really get your stuff in order. It's all about ramping up now towards fall. Do you feel like that? I don't have, like there's like an added pressure or something. It's coming. It's here. You can just almost see hunting season ahead of you. Do you ever feel like that once June hits?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I try to stay kind of prepared all year long, but I definitely seem to kind of ramp it up towards summer. And I guess subconsciously I'm trying to peak, right when hunting season hits.
Yep.
Kind of with everything, with archery, with my just overall preparation, physical fitness, all that stuff. So I do try to keep everything kind of where I want it year round, but I definitely do kind of feel that pressure building and that excitement. And I kind of focus on trying to peak everything and get everything dialed in, right in time.
And you talk about the excitement. That is definitely a thing too. Sometimes I almost find that I love the anticipation of the months leading up to hunting season almost as much as I like the actual hunting season. Like I love getting out there and seeing the bucks in the bean fields. I love, shooting out back with your buddies, and I love all that, like checking the trail cameras and just all the excitement and like what might possibly happen this year, like those feelings.
Yeah.
That's some of my favorite stuff.
Yeah, it's awesome. Like your text messages with your close groups of friends is like increasing, and we're talking about gear and trips and all that stuff. I mean, I love it.
Yeah, you can't beat that. But what you mentioned a second ago is why I thought you'd be the right guy to talk to about this, because you mentioned that you're trying to be preparing and doing things all year, not just in the summer, but all year long. And of the people that I know that are close friends and also very, very successful hunters, you're one of the best that I've seen of really following through on the off-season stuff. From everything I've seen and heard from you, it seems like you are quite busy all through the year. You've said numerous times in some of the past conversations we've had, just off air and on the podcast, about how much priority you put on things like scouting and how that's almost more important than the actual hunting sometimes. So what I want to do here, which we've not done in the past, is do a really deep dive on what your summer looks like.
Okay.
Everything that's going on. So some of the routines, how you're making archery practice part of your routine, how you're going about and doing all the different scouting work that you may or may not be doing this time of year, whatever final preparations you're doing, prepping locations, preparing access, I don't know, doing trail cameras. I don't know a whole lot about what your summer situation looks like, so that's what I'm kind of curious to dive in and see what someone like you is doing in these final 3 months or so before the season. So maybe a good place to start is what you were just doing this past weekend, because you were just at the Total Archer Challenge, right?
Yep.
And just before we started recording, you said that you actually look at Total Archer Challenge as something that you work towards. So it's not like you were just starting your preparation now for the hunting season. You've been actually preparing for Total Archer Challenge, which is then probably helping you prepare for hunting season 3 months from now. What is that? Why do you look at TAC like that? What did the preparation look like? Why was that something that you thought you really wanted to work towards? And maybe even, sorry to interrupt you, we should maybe also explain what Total Archer Challenge is for people that aren't familiar.
Yeah, the Total Archer Challenge is an event that it's held in several locations. I've only done the one in Michigan just because it's kind of close to home and easy for my friends and I to travel to. But it's an event that is designed to kind of mimic more of, I guess, like an out west type hunting scenario. Not necessarily every shot. There's plenty of shots that we would encounter, here in the Midwest, that type of thing. But they make it challenging in the fact that the shots are typically longer distance. A lot of shots in that 40 to 60 yard range, and of those shots, a lot of times you're trying to slip it through an area 2-3 inches wide downrange, or in the brush where the shadows and the lighting is so bright you really can't make out what you're aiming at. And then some of the harder courses, it really incorporates some much longer shots with some steep declining shots and a lot of like elevation hiking up and down. So it's a cool event that kind of tests your shooting skill as well as physically. It can be somewhat physically demanding too. We shot 3 courses in a day and a half, and I can't remember exactly. I think my buddy was tracking. I think we put on like 13 and a half miles.
Nice.
So, it's good. And you're out there in the heat, and, you're shooting down range. You got to take in the wind into account. If the target's lower than where you're standing, and cutting that range and all that stuff. So it's not one of those things you're going to, pull your bow out of your bow case and show up and do well. And
some people probably do that though, don't they?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Maybe don't do well, but they show up and just shoot. Right?
Yeah. I think a lot of people do that. But for me personally, I kind of take it as just almost like a personal challenge that, I want to prepare for it. And so that I'm shooting very well when I get there. And my goal is to, not miss any shots. And I want to put them all in the kill zone. I'm not keeping score or anything. I'm just, aiming behind the shoulder like I would in a hunting scenario. But that's like a goal of mine. Like I want to go there and do well as a challenge to myself, not to outdo anybody else, but just kind of prove to myself that, that I can do well there and make some of those challenging shots and just kind of improve. That's the main thing. I just want to constantly improve.
Yeah. And it's interesting you say that, and it makes me think about, and this is probably something I need to tie to my archery practice, because I tie this to like my physical fitness stuff. I'm just not personally good at being the person who's just gonna get up and get pumped to be working out every day just to do it. I typically need to have some kind of goal I'm working towards, like some kind of event or something that's like weighing on me, so that when I wake up in the morning and it's 5:30 in the morning and I don't want to get out of bed and I think, I don't want to go do my run, but then I remember, you got that trip coming up. And if you don't stay to what you said you're going to do with this running, trying to get in shape, you're going to get your butt kicked. You have to do it. Or I know many times I've been coming back the final stretch of a run, and it's the last 100 yards and I'm whooped. And I always try to sprint that last 100 yards, so just push it there at the end. And I've had many times, and I always imagine the same scenario. It's at the last 100 yards. I'm so exhausted. I just want to stop. And then I have this little conversation in my head as I'm starting to sprint. And like, what are you going to happen when it's the last 100 yards and there's an elk at the top of the hill and you have to get there before he goes over the other side? And so I imagine trying to run up the hill with my bow and being there to get that elk before he goes over the side. And that's the kind of stuff that like help me push through or help me stick to the kinds of things I'm trying to do. It kind of seems like Total Archer Challenge was a thing like that a little bit for you to have that challenge, that goal to work towards, which then is helping you work towards larger goals.
Yeah, totally. It's I looked at it as a preparation, for hunting for sure. I'm going out west again this year, and you mentioned kind of your run and what you're thinking that last 100 yards. Well, I'm going on my first elk hunt. And it's in a part of Colorado that what I'm told is the rugged of the rugged. A lot of people avoid it just because of it's really hard to navigate. But I've been doing the same. Like I work out year round, but I've been changing my workouts and really focusing on that elk hunt coming up, because I want to make sure that my elk muscles are good, and that my endurance is good, and my cardio and that I'm able to handle weight. So I've changed my workout and been gearing towards that, because I feel the same way. I don't want that to be the limiting factor.
Yeah.
In fact, I want to make sure that I eliminate anything that could possibly cause me not to have success. I want to eliminate as much of that as possible.
Because there's already so many variables outside of our control, right?
That's right.
That's what I'm always trying to remind myself. There's so much that can go wrong just in nature that nature's going to throw at me. I better make sure I can control everything I can. Right?
That's right. And I can handle if nature throws me something and something goes wrong. Yeah. I can handle if that bull's coming in and he gets downwind of me and he outsmarted me or whatever. I can handle that. I can't handle when the mistake falls on my shoulders.
Yeah.
That really hits hard for me, and it always has. Like I take that stuff to heart. It drives me nuts, and I literally, like, it makes me crazy and sick for months. I mean, I will literally fester over that stuff, and then I'll just make sure that never happens again.
Yeah.
Or do what I can to make sure that never happens again. And I guess that's kind of how my preparation with hunting, over the last 10, 15 years has always been, is just anything that I control that I can control and that I can improve. Like I'm motivated to do that. I feel like I owe it to the animals, and it's actually something that I just enjoy doing in general. So just trying to improve all those areas to just eliminate mistakes. If I make a mistake, that's fine. You use it as like a learning tool, and that's how you improve. But you gotta identify it, admit that you made that mistake, and then do what you need to do to fix it.
Yeah. So let's pivot back to the archery side. So Total Archery Challenge was this one of these different stepping stone challenges to work towards to prepare yourself for hunting season. You said you wanted to go into it and get a kill shot on every one of them. Did you?
Yeah, this was actually the first year. I've done it 3 years. This was the first year that I missed a target, and it was a shot at I think it was like a bedded sheep or something up an incline, but about 40 yards down range. You had to put it between two trees, maybe 3 inches apart, and half of my group stepped to the left where it was wide open, and then half of the group stayed right where we were supposed to shoot and tried to snake it through.
Yeah.
And I pinwheeled the little tree on the left. So it would have went right into the vitals, but I didn't make it through the little 3-inch gap. But other than that, yeah, I was very happy with the way I shot. I mean, I was executing my shot well. I felt steady. I put a lot of shots in the 10 ring and pretty much all of them in the vitals. So yeah, I was actually really pleased with the way I shot, the way the bow performed, and it was just a great time.
So what do you do to prepare for something like that? And I guess, answer me this: did your preparation for TAC look dramatically different than what your preparation would look like leading into hunting season, or is it the same kind of thing? Just you're doing it earlier.
It's not dramatically different. I've kind of come into this this routine or this method that I do to kind of prepare for hunting season. So I guess it wasn't that different than what I did for the Total Archery Challenge. I think with the Total Archery Challenge, what I do is maybe pick up the long distance shooting just a little earlier, because I know I'm going to have some 80, 90, 100 plus yard shots. So, once I get my bow shooting the way I wanted it, I went through all, the arrow building and the arrow configuration, the testing against different things. Once I was confident in that, then I got my sight marks, and then I just basically was shooting 60 to 130.
So walk us through what that actually looks like. So how much time are you spending getting all that gear tuned up like that? When does that begin? When are you doing that stuff? How literally talk us through that whole thing from the beginning, and then once that's done, what's actually happening at that? You said you're shooting at 60 out to 130. Is that you're doing that every day? Is that you're doing once a week? Is that you're doing it twice a day? Talk me through all of that.
Okay. So basically, how I start everything is like I build my own arrow. So I have found an arrow that works really good for my setup. And that was through a lot of trial and error. So I order my shafts uncut, unfletched, nothing installed. I cut them myself, because what I found is you get them from, some archery shops and stuff, they have them pre-cut and they pre-fleshed, and you get 12 and you weigh them, and you might get some that are, 4 or 5. I've had as much as 10 grains difference between the dozen. So that's just not, that the way my mind works, that's not good enough. So I order my shafts, I cut them myself, and then the next thing I do is I square both ends. So there's a G5 makes a little squaring device. Just because the saw cuts, it doesn't mean it's perfectly square. So if your nock or your insert, isn't sitting flush to the shaft, that's going to affect your impact. So I make sure both ends are squared. And then I go through with my scale and I weigh all the shafts, make sure they're all coming in, exactly the same. And that's when I go and I install my my components. So I use like a 55 grain stainless steel insert. I weigh all those individually. So just in case I get one that's 55 or 54, if I have a shaft that's 1 grain lighter, I'll put, I'll mix and match to make sure the arrows are, as I'm building them, they're weighed the same. They're coming in exactly the same. So I do the same thing with the nocks. So as I'm building these arrows, once I get them all built and they're all weighed the same with the nock, the shaft, the insert, and the point.
And when are you doing this? Is this different times of year, or every year do you say, all right, it's March, this is the time to get my arrows ready. Do you have any kind of like routine yearly when this happens, or is it just as needed?
Usually my mind focuses back to archery hardcore right when the season ends.
Gotcha.
So I do a lot of like indoor stuff. I'll go down to like the local archery shop and I'm shooting this is kind of my time of year to like test things. So, okay, I know my setup last year worked great because I tested things and I went with the best setup I could. Now I'm trying to find, can I improve it? What can I do to get better? So,
was there anything last year, and sorry I keep interrupting you, but so looking back at last season, when you got to the season being done, it's January or February, and you're starting to have this conversation with yourself this year, 2019, was there something that you looked at from last year and said, I want to change this? Did you have something to tweak?
Yeah, and I'll actually get to that.
Cool. All right.
Okay. So
I should just shut up and let you talk.
No, that's okay. It's actually coming. So once I get those bear shafts made, then I go to paper with the bear shaft. Okay, and what I'm doing is I'm trying to get a perfectly centered circle bullet hole with the bear shaft.
Shot through a piece of paper that's stretched.
That's right. This is assuming your bow is already tuned. I'm not going to go through all that.
Yeah.
Your bow is tuned perfectly. Your arrow spine matches your bow. That's all a prerequisite. That should all be done, that should all be found out and done, before this point. So I shoot through paper and I make sure I'm getting that perfect bullet hole. So I might shoot 3 and, I adjust the rest a little or adjust my, the spacers on the Matthews bow there just to make sure I get perfect arrow flight. So then I'm getting bullet hole. Then I grab another shaft and I'm getting a slight left tear. Okay. So then what that means is, every arrow's a little different. Every knock's a little different. So I rotate it, shoot it again. They call that knock indexing. So I do that, rotate left, a quarter until I get that perfect bullet hole.
Kind of say you make me feel like such a schmuck.
Well,
I don't do any of this.
That's okay. That's okay. And I'm not saying you have to do this. I know a lot of guys that do nothing like this and kill plenty. So this is just what I do. I'm not telling anyone else they need to do it. And I'm not even saying it's the right thing to do. It's just what I do.
Yep.
And what I do might change, from year to year. It's kind of morphed into, and if anything, it tends to get a little more involved. But sometimes I have to tell myself, enough is enough. It's shooting good. Like you just run with it.
Yep.
So I knock index till I'm getting the bullet hole with every single shaft. If there's a shaft that I just can't get that bullet hole with, I usually keep that as like a practice shaft. So, okay, I got them all shooting perfect bullet hole. I mark on the top, like with a little Sharpie, a silver Sharpie, where that top is. So I know when I fletch, I'm going to fletch it. So that's the top of the arrow because I know it's coming out of the bow perfectly straight. So then I go and I fletch. Same thing, weighing each fletching, making sure they all 2 dozen arrows end up being exactly the same. And, from there, that's when I go out and that's when I start, sighting in my bow, getting my marks. And you asked me if I changed anything from last year, and I did. So a big thing, in April, in May, I was testing arrow flight with downrange grouping. So I forgot to bring it. I was going to bring it, but I have this big chart that I do where I shoot, I'll shoot at 40, I'll shoot at 80. And what I'm doing is I'm shooting 3 arrow groups and I'm measuring the group. Okay. So I might do this bow to bow, like my Halon 32 versus my Traverse, just to see which one I'm shooting better. But what I was really focusing on, I did shoot those 2 bows against each other, but I was also shooting on 3 fletch versus a 4 fletch. Okay. So what I noticed with my 3 fletch last year, I noticed my arrow flight was a little noisier than I wanted. And I was like, okay, I want slightly quieter flight. It wasn't a big deal. I killed some animals, but I think I can get better. I think I can get the arrow quieter downrange. So I went with a lower profile 4 fletch. So then I was using, I tested those against each other, and I think I shot, 80 groups, measuring the greatest distance between the 2 farthest arrows, in my group out of the 3 arrow group. And it was clear that for me, the 4 fletched was more accurate than the 3. Now we're talking, let's say at 40 yards, say my group was, inch and a half with the 4 fletch, and with the 3 fletch at 1.67. I mean, we're talking splitting hairs here, right? Kind of seems silly. But to me, for me, it's just like, hey, I improved.
Yeah.
Remember we talked about before, you grab inches everywhere.
Yeah.
And for me, that's an inch. And it's also just kind of helps increase my confidence. Like, hey, I'm shooting, 0.1, 0.1 inch better. So I don't know, that. Mentally it's, I think it's good for you. So then what I did is I started using some slow motion video, and I wanted to see the arrow flight. So now, like with your iPhone or some of these high end cameras, you can, put the camera right behind you, shoot that arrow flight, and in slow motion actually see what your arrow is doing downwind. And I don't know if you remember, but the spring was really windy.
Yeah, I do.
It was hard to find a calm day to shoot. So I was like,
still feels like it now.
Right.
It's so windy here at my house.
Yeah, I remember we were trying to get ready for Total Archery Challenge to get our long range, marks on, and it's like we couldn't get a day where it was calm. So with that slow motion photography or video, what I noticed was like, man, when you shoot in a crosswind, your arrow comes out of the bow. And then depending on, where the wind's blowing or which direction, your arrow kicks big time one way or another, depending. So if you're getting a right to left, your arrow will kick way knock left out there. And I never realized, I guess I kind of just assumed the arrow would just kind of drift. Yeah. Well, it doesn't. It pulls that back end and
pulls the fletching because there's more.
That's right.
To catch the air, right?
Yeah. And I figured it did that to a point, but I couldn't believe how dramatic it was. And I was like, holy smokes, if I hit an animal at that distance where it's at mid kick, like where's my penetration?
Yeah.
So I reached out to all these guys. I talked to Tim Gillingham, a bunch of pro shooters basically. Cause these are the guys I feel like think like me.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Like, as far as I guess I prepare a lot like a target shooter.
Yep.
But it just gives me confidence in the deer woods. So, got to talking about that, and one guy mentioned, check the way of the natural spin of your arrow coming out of the shaft as a bear shaft. So what you do is you mark the top of your arrow, shoot at 3 feet, and then look at the target and see where that mark on the top of the arrow is. It to the left, to the right. So for mine, my arrow naturally spins without any fletching to the left. I was fletching to the right. A lot of guys fletch to the right. Not saying you need to switch to the left, but what that does, and it's been verified in like super slow-mo video, your arrow that wants to go left will actually come out of the bow going left, and then when you got that right that right helical, it'll go back to the right. Okay, so you're actually getting a reverse,
right?
And it happens pretty quick. Now there's been world record shooters that shoot with a right fletch, which I'm sure with I think it's more of like a right hand thing or the way your string is twisted. But there's been world records set with guys shooting the opposite of that.
Sure.
So what I found was I was like, okay, well, the theory was I was getting some sort of knuckleball. I was trying to minimize that kick.
Yep.
I wanted to get the arrow spinning hard and fast.
That makes sense.
So more of like a football spiral, right?
Yep.
A football spiral kind of stabilizes in the wind and it kind of stays tight. And I figured too, after talking with Tim, like, if I can get that arrow spinning, even if it does kick, you can't get rid of that kick in the crosswind, but it will, because it's spinning, it'll go inline quicker.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to verify it. So I fletched up, 4 fletch with the left helical, 4 fletch with the right helical, and then I did the same video testing. And so I was shooting multiple arrows downrange with the same wind, enough that I felt it made a difference. But what I found was when I fletched with the left, because my arrow naturally wanted to go there, I wasn't getting that knuckleball downrange. So the kick was left, and it brought back inline quicker. So it was very noticeable on video. Now, it might be 5 feet, it might be 10 feet. It's kind of hard to tell, when it's downrange, but it was happening faster because I was getting that harder spin quicker. It didn't have to reverse. Yeah. Now, in my mind, the way that translates into hunting is penetration is all about getting the back end of your arrow in line with the front end of your arrow, right?
Yep.
That's what you want.
Get
It
straight.
doesn't matter how heavy your arrow is. If you're coming in and you got wonky arrow flight and your point hits, to the right and your nocks to the left, that's going to eat up your penetration.
Yeah.
You can get really good penetration even with a light arrow if everything is in line and that force of the arrow is coming right through the back end. So to me, that was an improvement that I made.
Yeah.
And substantial enough that I switched everything to a 4-fletch with a left helical. And then how did that translate downrange? Well, I started shooting, once I did start getting some calmer weather, I started stretching it out. And I noticed that my group started sucking in even more. So
wow.
I think I was getting less wind drift now. I'm real, because I've been doing this for a few years. I know what I was shooting last year at 80, at 100 with the 3-fletch, a little bit higher profile vein. And now, I was able to compare those numbers on that sheet with my grouping with the 4-fletch with the left helical. So, and it shrunk. So
wow.
Again, minimal, that's at long distance at 20, 30 yards, the average guy, is not going to see a big difference. I'm not even going to see a big difference at 20 or 30 yards, but to me, it's an improvement.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I just all year long, like when it's not hunting season, I'm in what can I improve to increase my success in the woods through archery, through staying in shape, through eating healthier, through gear, new gear, switching out gear modifications, anything like that to kind of make my system and make my system more effective and conducive to, helping me achieve success. But as far as like the archery thing, like when I look at a lot of my friends and some guys that are even just acquaintances, there's a couple things I think stand out, like as to why maybe they're not having the success that they want. And one of them by far is just your shooting on animals.
Yeah.
And I think it's something that is just, everybody knows it's important, but it's just not prioritized high enough.
Yep.
It's just not. And guys are like, well, I could put it, in a softball size at 30 yards or baseball size. I mean, that to me, that's not even close to being as precise as I want to be in the deer woods. Now, would I be happy with a baseball size at 30 yards, with a 160-inch buck and a crosswind while I'm angling down out of, a tree saddle or something like that? Yeah. But that's why I try to be so precise in the off season and get that pinpoint accuracy. So when I do get those challenging shots, I know I'm going to be off. My form's off. We've got the wind going, adrenaline, your muscles are more tense. I know my shot's not going to be perfect.
Now, a lot of you guys are familiar with the old hunting tradition of eating, some organ, the heart or a chunk of liver off the first animal you kill. I had that when I was a little kid, and it was a big deal. Organ meats were always prized by frontier people who knew the importance of getting a lot of different minerals and nutrients. And as often is the case, those guys were onto something, because organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. And you can get the same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil, made exclusively from regeneratively raised, grass-fed, and finished cattle. Heart and Soil's unique freeze-drying process means all those important nutrients are trapped in, ensuring you experience every one of the benefits of nature's superfood in a clean, convenient, taste-free capsule. Find out more at heartandsoil.co. And make sure to use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase. That's heartandsoil.co. Use the code MeatEater. There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store, or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today.
Perfect. But because my setup and everything is so precise and the muscle memory that I built all year, my miss is going to be less.
Yeah.
And an inch or 2 inches at 30 yards on a big whitetail, especially if he's alert, especially if he drops on the shot, that could result in getting an animal that you wouldn't have.
Yep.
So again, it's just grabbing inches everywhere that, are going to kind of help you succeed in the deer woods. So I'm just kind of always looking for those little edges and angles.
All right, so first, want to thank our friends at Vortex Optics. As I've been mentioning over the last handful of weeks, I've been using a number of the different products over the last year now. And right about now, it's June, I'm going to be busting out the spotting scope to start doing some of my long distance observation for whitetails out in these bean fields that are just starting to come up. This is my favorite things to do last year. There's a bean field across the road from my house, and you see lots of deer out there. And so last year I got the Vortex Viper HD spotting scope, and I set it up on my front porch, and I got a phone scope for it, so you can attach your phone to the spotting scope and then see through it and record through it. And it was just so much fun to have a spotting scope set up there to be able to see these bucks up close, to get a little bit of cell phone video. Just a lot of fun, not to mention if you've got somewhere you can hunt, where you can do this kind of thing, scout from a long distance, you can learn a lot too, especially in the summer. At least getting an inventory of the bucks available, man, a high quality spotting scope is a great tool. I had great results with the Viper HD, and then I also used the Razor HD on my Mexican Coues deer hunt, and really enjoyed using that scope as well. So definitely think those are options worth checking out, and you can learn more at vortexoptics.com. Yeah, so you talked about like prioritization. This is a conversation that me and Dan had a few weeks ago, because we were talking about how it's just like life feels like it's crazy. We both have, he's got like 7 kids, I've got 1, and just seems like you're running around like crazy. There's no time for anything, business pulling you this way, family pulling you that way. It's really easy to come up with excuses for why you couldn't shoot your bow or why you didn't get your exercise in for the day or whatever. So on the archery side of things, how do you fit it into your life? Because I know you've got a whole lot going on. You're really busy too. How do you make this archery practice a part of your life? How often does that happen? What does that look like in your daily or weekly routine or whatever it might be?
Yeah. In the winter time, when I really start hitting it hard, I keep things indoors. So I might go down to the archery shop at lunch and shoot. It's usually too cold to shoot outside like in the morning or anything, but I might go down there at my lunch or right after work, or in my basement, I have about 14 yards I can set up. So I have a bag target down there. And what I do during that time frame is I'm just working on repetition. I'm working on shot execution, increasing maybe my pin float. I'll watch the pin on the target and see what it's doing, and then I'll adjust my bow setup or stabilization depending on what that's doing. That's a big one. We can talk about that in a few too. But so during those months, I'm shooting, anywhere from 4 to 6 days a week, but it might be a very short session or it might be an hour. It just depends. As things get nicer outside, I have, like I said, I have the bag target in the basement. I got a couple hay bales and a 3D target behind the house. And then I go to our buddy Tom's out there and Leslie that has, the big 100-yard range there. So, I'm shooting almost every day, but what I'll do is I'll get up early for work. Usually that's my gym time, but sometimes I'll get up early. Like if it's say I go to the gym 5 days a week or something, on those other days, I'll get up early and go outside and shoot before work. It gets light earlier, so I can get a good hour in before I need to be to work. So, or it might be right after work, or it might be that last 30 minutes of daylight after, everybody's in, kind of ready for bed, and it's 8:45 and you still got 30 minutes to fling a few arrows. So I try to fit something in almost every day. I'm not perfect. I don't get it every day, but I'd say I'm 100% 5 days a week doing something. And I try to mix in, a handful of arrows sessions, just try to make everything perfect, 5 perfect shots with some more longer sessions. And those are the ones where I might be trying to find my marks, or I might be testing things against each other. So that's kind of year round. I love archery. I've told you this. I love archery nearly as much as hunting. I really do enjoy shooting. So, I mean, it's not work for me. It's not hard. And I do prioritize it, but it's something that I like. It's almost like a stress reliever, like meditation time for me too.
I've heard a lot of people say that. I mean, there's a certain level of zen that is required with archery. Like, you have to be fully consumed in the moment by it, and it keeps your mind off everything else, I think.
Yeah.
There's something really, I don't know what the right way to describe it. I don't know if it's powerful or restorative or something, but when you're able to do something that fully consumes you and you're able to lose sight of everything else for half hour or an hour or something, whether it be like archery, or another thing for me is like fly fishing. When I'm fly fishing, like, I'm so in the moment with every little thing. All of a sudden 4 hours pass. I'm like, whoa. And like, you come out of that like really refreshed in a certain way.
Yeah.
So I get that.
Yeah, I totally get that too with archery. It's one of the only times I can sit there and do something, and whatever stress is at home or at work or, behind me, it's like it disappears. But then, usually I get a text of someone complaining about something, and it's brought right back to reality. But yeah, that's one of the only things that, even when I'm hunting, like, I'll be sitting there and I'll sometimes think about that stuff.
Yeah.
But with archery, I don't.
It's funny. You mentioned the phone. I've actually just been thinking about this very thing over the last couple of weeks as I've tried to get better with my archery stuff going on. And I've started to try to take advantage of that like zen quality and allowing myself the space to do that by leaving my phone. So I'm actually purposely leaving my phone in the barn so that I don't get that distraction, because I'm like saying to myself, I need this like half hour with nothing else, no thoughts, nothing. So I'll leave the phone, put on silent so I can't hear it, and then I get out back behind the house and do my shooting. And I found more and more, like, I'm becoming more and more aware of what like a ball and chain my phone is.
Oh yeah.
And how like addicted I am to like checking it for no reason at all. And like, I don't know, more and more I'm finding like that I need to just keep it away from me to really have the space and like presence of mind to be the best father I can be, or the best shooter I can be, or the best writer, or whatever it is I'm working on. I'm finding more and more you just got to put on silent, put it away for a couple hours.
Yeah.
That's totally not here or there, but
well, no, I agree. I find myself too getting a little too attached to that thing. Sometimes like it won't even buzz and I'll still look at it.
Right. Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's almost like a habit. But there's a funny quick story. I was up north a few years ago, and we were canoeing kayaking on the Pine River, which is one of Michigan's fastest rivers. And, I'm pretty experienced kayaker, so it wasn't that big a deal. But I opened my dry box. We were coming around this corner. There was this big, cool dune. I was like, oh, man, what a neat picture. So I get my phone out, and I snap a picture. Well, this river's moving fast, and it starts sucking me into this, like, outside turn. And there's all these, like, pine trees that with, like, overhanging branches that were, like, sticking out into the river. And I was like, oh, crap, trying to get everything back in the dry box real quick. And I shut it, but I didn't lock it.
Oh.
And I got sucked under the bank there, and all those branches like kind of hit me in the face, and I leaned away, which is not, you're supposed to lean towards it. I leaned away, dumped the kayak, lost my oars, lost my phone, lost my camera, gone. Man. But I was up north for the next, 4 or 5 days, and it was funny. Like, I was bummed about the phone, but like, it was such a relief, or not a relief. It felt so good not to have the phone. Like, I felt completely fine. In fact, I felt better without it.
Yep.
I didn't worry about anything else. I just had fun. I enjoyed, doing what you're doing. I wasn't sour for a minute, other than that initial thought of losing my phone. It was like, it felt really good.
Yep.
So I've been trying to do that too, set my phone down and try to get away from it. And it definitely can suck you in.
Yeah. I'm thinking about doing something like that during hunting season, because I've got a weird thing. A lot of people are on their phones while they're hunting. I do that too. When you get, nothing's going on for however long, you pull up your phone and look at Instagram or something. Now, I feel a certain obligation to have my phone, because a lot of like my work is like supposed to be documenting my hunts and stuff. So there's a need to have my phone for that. But I think this year I want to try to implement some kind of mandatory like phone away time for like a majority of my hunt. So maybe I haven't quite thought this through, but okay, the first 10 minutes when I get there, I can do a bunch of documentation. And then maybe like one other time in the middle of the hunt, I'll do a bunch of stuff. Otherwise, I'm going to put my phone like in a different pocket in my backpack where I can't easily get it. So just like I don't do like the impulse grab and looks throughout the hunt. I think that would probably would lead to a more enjoyable experience and better hunt, so you're not as distracted and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But we're way off topic. What I was going to ask you about next was, so you talked about these two different kinds of practice sessions. You talked about like the 5 perfect arrows, and then talked about the longer hour long. Talk to me about what you're actually doing during that time period, because I think a lot of times when we think about getting our practice in, we'll just people just go shoot for however much time they have, and then they go back, and they're not really thinking about what they're doing. But a lot of studies have shown, and even we had this conversation with Brad Stulberg, the author of a book called Peak Performance, and he had a section within that book where they talked about, there's this concept that was popularized by Malcolm Gladwell in a book a long time ago called this 10,000 hours principle. Have you ever heard about that? Mm-hmm. Basically, the gist is that research has supposedly shown that it requires something like 10,000 hours of practice to become an expert or to become an elite in some kind of field. But the key thing there that was often not mentioned within that, but was tied to the original study, was that it's not just any kind of practice. It's what they call deliberate practice. And it's a really, really big difference between just going out there and doing something versus this deliberate practice. And how they described deliberate practice was something that was very, very thoughtful of what you're doing and why you're doing it and working towards some specific goal or some specific thing you're trying to work on. So, if you're a basketball player, just going out there and shooting hoops isn't deliberate practice. That's maybe just a little bit of practice. Deliberate practice might be going into it and saying, okay, for the next half hour, I'm going to focus specifically on my free throw form and really focus on getting a good follow through. And then they hammer that home for a half hour, that kind of stuff. So is your practice deliberate in some kind of way? Or what does that look like for you?
Yeah, I call it practicing with a purpose. So I actually did a podcast with a friend not long ago, and we were kind of talking about this. But yeah, for me, I do enjoy archery, and sometimes I will go out with my buddies. Like when we were shooting back out here, I wasn't necessarily working on anything. I was just enjoying company, flinging a few arrows. But when I'm on my own, it's almost never like that. I'm always testing or trying to improve on something. So like for instance, when I'm doing my indoor stuff or in the basement, a lot of times I'm working on my shot execution. And we talked about some drills before, and some of the drills that I like to do are, draw back, close my eyes, real close to the bail so you don't worry about missing. I close my eyes and I just focus on pulling through the shot. Okay. I try to relax all my muscles, my hand, my shoulders, everything. And then when I'm ready to activate that shot execution, I start pulling straight back. I kind of focus on pulling my elbow straight back. And I'm just trying to ingrain that shot execution so that I don't ever have to think about it. It's just automatic. It's not something that, is ever going to cause me an issue in the deer woods. So I even though I feel like I've mastered that shot execution, I still work on it because I've been on the other end of, with target panic and drive-by shooting and punching the trigger. And I don't ever want to go back to that. And then, or sometimes I'll go out on a practice session and I'm working on my pin float. And what that is I'm drawing back and I'm focusing, I'm letting my breath settle. I'm relaxing my hand, my shoulders, trying to get, no muscle involvement. You want as least muscle involvement as possible. And then I just see what my pin does. Now, is my pin going left to right, kind of in a figure 8? If it's doing that, then I add weight to my stabilizer out front. That minimizes the left to right. Okay, and I got a lot of this information from pro shooters and just talking with guys that have kind of went down this road. So if your pin's doing that, you can add some weight out front. It's kind of like, imagine holding a golf club.
Yep.
You hold it by the head and you can whip that handle real fast. But if you hold it by the handle and you try to whip the head where the weight is, it's like harder, right?
Yeah.
It moves slower. So it can slow your horizontal pin movement down. So maybe your pin is, what I have trouble with is my pin likes to drop. So it'll be there on the bullseye and drop out, and bring it back up and drop out. So on mine with the Matthews bow, and you shoot a Matthews bows have a lower grip in the system. They tend to be a little bit top heavy. So they stabilize really well with some weight below the handle. So I run a rear bar. So if my pin is going low and dropping out, I add weight to the rear bar. And what that does is it helps keep the pin up. So it's just, you're adding weight to the back, holding your pin up.
Okay.
Opposite if it's, if your pin's going up, up out of the target, you would want to add weight to the front or take weight off the back.
Off the rear bar.
So what I do, and what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get a bow set up where my pin just wants to sit there. Yeah. It's like perfectly balanced. When I draw back and I settle my pin, I come to anchor and I settle, that it just wants to sit there. And that's not to say it's not moving. It is, but it's minimal.
Yep.
When we were up at the Total Archery Challenge, my buddy, he was having he shoots some Matthews too. He has just a straightforward stabilizer, which is fine. You can definitely use that for hunting and shoot really good. I know people that do it. It's just the Matthews bows, I think, tend to like a little bit of, weight below the handle, just the way they're built. But anyway, he was complaining that he couldn't hold his pin steady, and we just kind of got to talking about this a little bit. And so, when I'm trying to improve my pin flow, that's what I'm doing. I'm tinkering with stabilization, and every bow is different. My Traverse is a little different than the Triax that I had. Mm-hmm. The Verdicts might be a little different than the Halon 32. And what I'm trying to do is just get that pin to kind of sit there. I don't want to fight the pin. I want the pin to sit there, and if it's moving a little bit, that's fine, but I want it right on the spot. If it's going like this and jittery and I'm fighting and I feel like that's the type of pin movement that creates anxiety, anticipation. So you can imagine you're aiming at a mule deer buck foam target at the Total Archery Challenge out there that's 100 yards, and your pin's, dancing all over the place. It's above the back, it's below the body, it's actually coming off the animal. Yeah. What's that going to do? It's going to make you want to, time that shot. Okay. Oh, all right. It's on the deer, it's off the deer, it's on the deer. Boom. Yeah. That's how target panic starts. Yeah. So you'd be much better off, even with all that movement, if you just let the pin move and you just executed your shot, no matter what the pin was doing. In fact, you'd be better off if you just stared at the spot you wanted to hit and didn't even care where the pin was. If you just stared at that spot and executed, that pin's always coming back, so you'd be much better off. But to take it to the next level with stabilization, I'm trying to minimize that movement. So I couldn't live with the pin dancing all over the target like that, on and off. I want it to stay in that vital, more of like a slow, kind of steady movement, but it's there. It's not moving. So, that's when that's why I run a rear bar. Now, if you're hunting elk in Colorado, maybe you don't want to carry all that weight. Your shots are going to be 30 yards and in. You're in thick blowdown country in Colorado or something. Maybe you don't want to carry all that weight. You could take it off. I shoot fine without it. I don't shoot as good long distance. Yeah. I don't shoot as good close distance either, but it's much less noticeable. Right. 40 yards and in, you might be just guessing. If I took that rear bar off and I shot a group at 30 yards, they're all going to be right there. But when that's on there and that pin is just steady, they're slapping. I'm busting arrows. So, it might be a little overkill for your typical, tree stand guy, but I also shoot a heavier bow better. When I'm nervous, when the adrenaline's pumping, that little extra weight, I think that's why I gravitate towards the Matthews bows too. They're a little out on the heavier side, but I shoot them better. Yeah. And they kind of resist that movement and that shakiness. And then when I add that stabilization and that balance, it helps it even more. So everything is real calm. Even when the adrenaline's pumping and I'm, at full draw on a big buck, it's moving, and it's definitely moving more than when I'm shooting in the backyard, but it's very manageable. I don't feel that anxiety or anticipation to make it go. I just run my shot execution, and the arrow, hits behind the pin. And that's another thing too. Like, I want a bow that I relate with well, meaning I love archery, so I love bows. I love, getting a bow tech and setting it up. And, a lot of times I'll buy bows used more for the fact that I'm interested in the cam system and the tuning of it and how it shoots. And some of my buddies, have some of these bows and they've had me work on them and stuff. So I like to do that. I'll sometimes buy them and then I'll sell them, or sometimes I'll, sell them to a buddy or trade them or whatever. I get some enjoyment out of that, but I want a bow that that fits me perfect. And I've went to some other brands and stuff, and it's just like, when I say I want a bow that hits behind the pin, like I can be at 80 yards and see that pin on the target and it's floating, and the shot breaks, and I could just tell, like when the shot broke, my pin was 2 inches to the left of the mark. And I know that's where the arrow is going to be. But I've had some bows where I do that and it looks like it's right on the bullseye when the shot breaks, boom, and I go up there and it's like 3 inches to the left. And I'm like, what the hell? But I think you can become more in tune with that the more you shoot, the more you tinker with this stuff. But, I want a bow that hits behind the pin, where that pin is at, and I execute the shot, it's there. Or let's say I do make a bad shot. Let's say I'm at full draw and I'm like, oh man, I kind of rushed through that shot, or whatever. I rushed through it, or I pulled a little hard, or I was increasing my back tension and it didn't go when I wanted it to. It just didn't flow well. I want a bow that I'm still going to go up there and it's going to be boom right there in the group. Yeah. And there's some bows that do that for me and some bows that just don't. And the reason, the way I know that is because I guess I'm so, specific on like writing down like my group size and my testing and stuff like that. So, some of the older bows that I had, like Hoyts and Bowtechs and stuff, like I did a lot of the same stuff, and I'm where I'm at now because it's the best that I found for me. Yeah. And that might not be the bow for the next guy. Sure. But I guess that's kind of the level of the, preparation that I like to do.
And it comes back to another one of those principles of like deliberate practice, is that not only should you have a purpose with your practice, but I also remember reading about the importance of quantifying your success with that practice too, finding some way to measure, did it make progress? And you've mentioned over and over different ways that you're trying to measure things, measure what progress you made, measure the improvement, measure how well or how worse maybe you got in certain things. And I think that has allowed you to fine tune and keep getting better and better and better. And that's something I do not do a good job of at all when it comes to like my archery. I'm just out there flinging them and hoping. I'm like, do I feel like better about today? Like I'll come in and my wife will be, well, how'd it go? And I'm like, it was a good day. Or some days I'm like, son of a bitch. So that's how I measure success, is the first words I say when I come back in the house, but that's probably not the best way to do it. So you're going out there with a purpose. Each time you're going out there for one of these sessions, you're thinking about something you're going to try to improve usually. Is there like a typical time frame that you like? Is it just whatever time you have, or do you feel like there's value to making sure that a couple times a week you do spend an hour, because that really builds up your muscle memory or something? Or is there value in, I don't know, anything like that you think about, or not?
I feel like, those longer sessions are important. I feel like the 5 arrow thing, you go out there, try to make 5 perfect shots. That's more of like you're just checking the status, right? You're making sure like, okay, boom, I got it. My form is good. I'm going to put all the pressure on this first arrow. This is my one shot at, that big whitetail at, whatever range. And you put it right where it needs to be. That's a good feeling. You don't need 10 shots to warm up. You're there. You're ready. So I use those short ones more of like just a check. Yeah. Like a system check. Those longer sessions, whether it's half hour, an hour, 2 hours, whatever, those are when I try to work on things. And, a couple of those things we already talked about, or it might be just, getting your sight marks. Some of those longer distance things, it does take some time to kind of get accurate sight marks. And, I'm not shooting 100 yards because I want to shoot at a deer at 100 yards. It's just, for me, that longer practice, when I start shooting at that distance, like my 100-yard groups start looking like my old 40-yard groups, after a while. And anybody could do that, going through, some of the same setup, processes that guys do. But it just gives me so much more confidence at those shots that we take at deer in the deer woods. You know what I mean? It feels, they feel like gimmies.
Yeah.
You know, and they didn't used to feel like gimmies to me. They used to feel like this could go either way.
Right.
You know, and it really, and it reflected like that. I think I was lucky. I did have a few seasons where I was struggling with target panic so bad, and I lost multiple animals, but it came on quick, and I realized it quick, and I did what I needed to do to fix it quick. So I had a short window where it was causing me big problems.
Yeah.
Now, the beginning of, you know, my archery hunting, I wasn't executing the shot the way I am now, and I wasn't making perfect shots by any means all the time, but I didn't have target panic. I was making kill shots, maybe not perfect, but you know, it wasn't to the level that are the comfortable, the way I feel comfortable with it now. But there was that short window where I was really struggling. And I think a lot of guys that kind of end up going this route went through a similar period. You talk to a lot of the pro archers, like a lot of them went through a period like this. They love archery. They love it so much, and they start going to 80, 90, 100 yards, whatever, and their pins dancing all over the place. And they start punching the trigger because their anxiety level's high. So if you talk to a lot of these guys, they have the same sort of story.
Yeah.
You know?
So you mentioned one way to improve your confidence in just everything at actual shooting ranges in the field is to stretch it out in practice. So take these really long shots, get good at long shots when you're in your practice sessions, so that 30 and 40 yards feels like a gimme actually out there in the field. Are there any other ways you put stress on your situation in practice? So this is something we talked about with David Wise, is he's always trying to find ways to stress his system to practice. I think he called it like practicing at the fringes. So even as like a half pipe skier, he would try to practice for the worst case scenarios, so that when he was actually out there, in the big stage, on the big stage, no possible scenario could surprise him. So do you do anything? I know something, people talk about within our world is trying to shoot at different positions, stuff like that. Anything along those lines you do to change things up in your practice?
Yeah, absolutely. So all this stuff that I've been talking about so far is pretty much in the backyard, calm wind, perfect, your feet on even ground. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to narrow down my setup to get the most accurate, forgiving setup that I can get that I'm most confident in.
Yeah.
Once I know I'm going to roll with something, then I kind of switch modes to like, okay, now it's time to prepare for hunting.
Yeah.
And that's when's the last time you shot a deer standing on flat ground, with no wind from ground level?
Yeah.
Like never.
Never. Can't imagine that one.
Yeah. So that's when I start to do some other things. Like, so for instance, like, when I went on my antelope, I knew my shots were going to be, the antelope hunt a few years ago, I knew my shots were going to be long, and I knew I was probably going to be on my knees. So I practiced a ton on my knees at, 100 yards, 110 yards, hoping that 70-yard, 80-yard shot that I was probably going to get was going to feel easy.
Yeah.
So that's how I prepared for that one. Or, a lot of times, I switch nearly all my shooting out of, especially when I started using the saddle more, or even when I use the tree stand, a lot more angled shots coming out of trees, I practice a ton on flat ground. Now it's time to switch modes and start to practice real life shooting scenarios, because I can't shoot the same groups I can at 80, standing on a tree stand angled down that I can on flat ground, with no wind. So now it's you're starting to kind of work on that stuff so that what you can get away with, where your, extremes are, where you should kind of keep your comfort level. If I am shooting on flat ground, like a lot of times I'll have like these old tree stumps or logs that we cut, and I'll put 1 foot up, and shoot like that. So, when I shot my mule deer last year, that's how I was like, my back foot was, like 2 feet higher than my bottom foot. So just things like that kind of alter your balance. And it, when your form is really solid and ingrained, it doesn't really matter what your lower body's doing. You try to keep from the waist up that same That's my goal, is try to keep that waist up form the same no matter what I'm doing. And there's some severe angles from a tree stand, like straight down. There's definitely certain situations where that's going to be compromised some. So you have to practice those shots, those really awkward, those really tough shots. You do have to practice them to see where your arrow hits and how you perform. And those are really important. So what you talked about summer routine, as I get towards, when I say, I want to kind of peak at the, right at the beginning of hunting season, that's when I start really working on that stuff. This stuff, testing arrows, ingraining shot execution, all that stuff is gone. We've found something we're going to run with. So now we're switching to hunting mode.
And what time of year is it? Like, are you saying the last couple weeks before hunting season, the last month, the last 2 months? Like, when do you really like to be focusing on that part of your?
I would want to be doing that kind of stuff at least a month before my first hunt.
Okay.
So just really kind of switch gears. That's when I switched to broadheads. I'm shooting all my shots with broadheads.
All your shots are broadheads the last month.
Yeah, I mean, I might throw, I'm not gonna burn through packs and packs of them, but yeah, I'll shoot. I might shoot 3 broadheads and 1 field point or something like that in a group or something like that. You know what I mean? But the majority, I want to make sure those broadheads or what is working well with my system, that they're flying well. I want to know what they're doing in the wind. Are they drifting more than my field points? Because that's something you need to know.
Yeah.
Especially if you're going to be hunting out west. It's not uncommon to have a 60 to 80 yard shot. It's just not. And, if you want to increase your chance of success, you can prepare for, that type of range and be, really deadly. But those are things you need to know. You put a broadhead on the front, you're going to get more, more arrow drift. So another thing at the Total Archery Challenge too, like when you shoot a lot, you start to see and you understand like what your trajectory is doing, right? So there were some shots where, we see, a bedded muley, but, maybe 60 yards out, there's a tree that's covering the vitals. Like there's one in particular, I'm thinking there was a bent over tree. And it was right where you want to hit your arrow. So what I did was I ranged the tree and then I ranged the muley's head. The muley was like at 87. So we were all looking at it, we're like, oh man, like where do we hit?
Right.
You could aim at the butt and just hit foam. That'd be the safe play. But so because I could range the 60 and then I could range, the 87 on the muley, I knew just from shooting so much that I know my trajectory is going to miss that. So someone that doesn't shoot as much might not.
Yeah.
They might not take that shot, or whatever. But I knew, and a lot of the guys I were with are experienced shooters too, and they did the same thing. I would put the pin right on the tree, and it just sailed right over, dropped right into the vitals.
Nice.
So
that's cool.
Those are things that little things that may or may not ever happen in the woods. But I guess, like you were saying, practicing the fringes, I like to prepare for all possibilities. You know what I mean? Like if there's a bull of a lifetime in Colorado and there's a little tiny hole to squeeze it through, I'm not gonna wish it through. I want to know that it's going to go through there. But if I know it will, if I execute a good shot, I want to have the confidence to take that shot.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I do.
I'm not gonna roll the dice and be like, I'm not sure. If that's the case, I'm not taking the shot.
Yep.
But if it's possible, I want to have the confidence to do it.
Man, it seems like the way to do that is to have the kind of system you have in place. I mean, that makes a lot of sense.
It works for me. And like I said, the system has morphed. It might be different 5 years from now if we talk again, but it works for me. And I'm not saying this is what people should do. I'm definitely not saying that. It's just what I do.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Now, does this level of attention to minutia and preparing for the fringes and everything that you apply with your archery preparation in the summer, does that translate to other things you're doing in the field preparing? So, answer me that.
Yeah, totally. So, I take the same, I feel like I take the same type of thought process in preparing for the hunting season as I do with this. It's the same type of system. I'm always trying to find that next buck. I'm always trying to fine tune setups. I'm always trying to find new setups in new areas, scout new ground. Basically the way I always explain it is I try to over prepare, so the chances of me not succeeding are almost zero.
Yeah.
Like I would have to be really unlucky to not have some success. So I try to over prepare, do things, to me it's not over preparing or overboard. It's just what I do.
Yeah.
But when I kind of look at, other people, and I'm sure there's people out there that prepare more than me. But it's just what I do. And to me, it just feels what I need to do. And it's what I enjoy to do or enjoy doing. So I make the time to do it. Now it's a lot less than what it used to be. So, before kids and everything, but I still prioritize that time. I try to do it in bursts. Like I spent a lot of time as soon as that snow melted. I spent a lot of time. I got a lot of scouting in then. Went down to Iowa in preparation for this hunt. Scouted 2 or 3 new pieces of public, all the places all the places we were already familiar with. Got all the trees, marked all the access. We put on so many miles in just a couple days in preparation for this hunt coming up. I'm going during the rut. I want to see the rut sign.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't feel like I did what I needed to do if I just showed up.
Yep.
I know I could do that and still kill something, but it's just, like I said, I want to be prepared.
Yeah.
And that's a big hunt to me. It's important. I've waited years for the tag. It's expensive. I want to do what I need to do that will, increase my chance of success the most.
So when it comes to scouting, I know that you take scouting really seriously. You constantly are helping me scout more simply by the fact I know you're out there scouting and I'm not, and I feel bad about it. So it gets me off my ass in the woods. But you mentioned that snow melt time period, right? Snow comes off. It's probably the very best time of year to be able to see sign from the year before, and nothing's grained up yet. But now it's June when we're talking right now. What if someone just now is like realizing, crap, I really do need to get out and do some scouting? What is there anything they can accomplish during the summer? What are you doing still now during the summer? Everything's green and full.
Yeah.
What can you actually accomplish now?
This is because, with, a growing family and all that stuff, when I said I had to cut some things down, basically what I did was where I used to scout, if you saw me 20 to, 32, those years I was in the woods trying to learn about deer 5 or 6 days a week. Wow. I would literally go right from work and scout, and I would do that just about till it was dark. And it's just, I was completely enthralled in it. It's all I wanted to do. And, I think that kind of created a basis for a lot of, what I do now and what I've learned. But now that I'm a little busier, I kind of set specific time frames. So, in the winter months when there's snow, like I said, I focus on that indoor shooting stuff. I will scout some then too, because I do like to see like winter habitat, what the deer are doing. I look for trails in the snow. Okay, like this could potentially be, if we get snow during that late season, this could potentially be a good area. I'm looking for tracks of deer, mature buck tracks of maybe deer that survived, that sort of thing. So then, like I said, that when that snow melt, that's when I get in a bunch of my scouting, and I try to scout every area that I do hunt and throw in a handful of new potential areas. And I'm just trying to, that's more, I'm looking for rut sign. I am looking for like buck beds and that sort of thing too. I'm always looking for that. But, just everything is so visible then. So then get out of that, you get starting May, June, July. I kind of focus more on the turkey side of things, I think, during that time. I don't turkey hunt a whole terribly lot, but I really do enjoy it. So I think right now, this time frame right now, that kind of May, June, July, I probably make another switch, but that time I probably scout. Well, I know I scout quite a bit less, And that's, I kind of focus that time more with family, do a little turkey hunting with the kids, do definitely get my archery in there, but it's kind of a slower time for me. And it's a slower time because I'm choosing it to be slower. I still think there's plenty of information to find out there. But for me personally, it's like, okay, I can't do this all year round like I used to. I need to pick windows. So I focus on the windows where I think it's most beneficial to me and my style. So
Makes sense.
then you get into that July, August. That's when I start looking more for specific bucks that made it, targets to go after. And that's when I start kind of planning my fall. Like, okay, I got, there's a new big buck over here. He looks at least 3.5. I don't know who this deer is, and I try to keep tabs on him.
How are you actually doing that?
Like keeping tabs?
Yeah, so like how July, August, you're starting to find these deer that you're actually going to hunt and plan your fall.
Yeah.
How specifically is that happening? Is it that you are going and checking cameras once a week or something or moving cameras from property to property, or do you go and sit on these properties at night and watch fields, or walk me through that first step, finding these bucks you're going to hunt that year in July or August?
I guess I'd say all of the above. I do a lot of glassing, driving around. A lot of times, a lot of the areas I hunt, it's not something you necessarily see from the road. So I will get out and glass that, that last hour. And usually, I'm focusing on areas that I already know something's there. I'm just trying to see what he is. Did he make it? Is he there? What did he turn into? And I'm trying to narrow down those few bucks that I'm going to focus on. I definitely do run cameras, especially here. I don't do it much out of state. Out of state, I focus more on just like, kind of boots on the ground scouting. And I do still like that aspect of like not knowing what's there. You see a mature buck's in here, but I have no idea what he is.
Yeah.
I like that. I miss that sometimes. In Michigan,
I get that.
I get very few surprises. You know what I mean? Because I do scout things pretty thoroughly. I mean, every once in a while, you'll get like a 3-year-old or something or a 4-year-old pop up that you just like, oh, where is who is that deer? But I know my area so well that doesn't happen as much around home. But I'll check camera. I'll put cameras out. I'll check them. But during the summer months, I change things to mainly it might be for financial reasons, gas, batteries in the camera or whatever. I usually do 1 or maybe 2 checks before the season. That's it. So I'm not one of those guys I need to know what he's doing in July and even August. Like I want to know, like I'll pull those cameras and I'll look through those pictures and be like, oh yeah, man, those are sweet. There he is there. But I want to know where he's at those last few days of September.
Yeah.
And that's when there's a lot of times where I won't even touch a camera till then. And I don't necessarily have it exactly where I'm hunting, like the actual location. I'll have it in a spot where I feel like I can still get pictures, but I'm not ruining where my actual hunting is.
Yep.
My hunting location. And those spots are usually set up and prepared ahead of time because I know the areas. I know where the buck beds are.
Yep.
The ones that I found. I know the travel routes. I have a feeling that, the buck that's bedded in this bed, will feel safe traveling, this distance through this bit of cover just because he can stay hidden. So it's all those little pieces that I'm trying to put together in my mind and through history of the area, of the property, or history of what that deer has done in the past. It's all those little pieces that I'm putting together. So the locations are almost always ready and prepared ahead of time. I won't say always because I do a lot of running and gunning too, but a lot of those spots I'm familiar with. If a buck shows up there, a lot of times they do, and they bed in the same areas that, they have before, or our mature deer have before, and use those same type of areas. And, I can, if I hunt it right and if I wait for the right timing, if a deer shows up on one of those properties, I can usually get a crack at him.
So let's rewind a little bit though. So you're running cameras, but you're not checking them till like September, typically, right?
Yeah,
Like you're saying?
I've really toned that back. I used to be like the once every 2 weeks, 3 weeks, even once a month guy, and now I'm not.
Yeah. So it's just to determine, do I have the buck here that I want to hunt? So where do you mentioned how you're locating cameras in places that you can still get pictures, but it's not going to mess up where you're going to hunt. What are those types of locations you put a camera in the summer to get that inventory?
Yeah. In the summertime, I'm looking for, apple trees, field edges of food sources where they do feed in the summer. So a lot of times I'm like around bean fields. I typically have a knowledge of like where the mature deer bed, so like, let's say they're bedding, down this ravine and back in this low marshy area, and they're coming up the typical travel route is up through the ravine, and then they come into this giant destination bean field. So I'll put my camera there. A lot of times if there's a licking branch or something that kind of just sweetens the spot, I'll put it there, because deer work licking branches like all year long. And it's not going to be you're not going to get as good a pictures that you are like, in late October, but you're still going to, it concentrates deer, and you're going to get, they're more in, more in groups that time of year. So a lot of times I'll get pictures there. I focus a lot on water crossings. It just kind of depends. A lot of times I'll put them to, like, if there's a travel area, to a food source, I try to put it in there on, a few of the main trails, but knowing that, the camera's here, and the bed's over here, but I'm going to be hunting much closer to the bed.
Yep.
Because the mature deer is not going to be, during the hunting season, is not going to be getting to where that camera is.
Yep.
In daylight. I don't, because of the way I set up cameras, I don't get very many daylight pictures.
Yeah.
And I do that on purpose. I don't really want my cameras to be getting daylight pictures. If they are, I should be hunting there.
Yeah.
And I don't really like my cameras where I hunt. And I know some guys do. Like I think I watched a video of Jeff Sturgis saying that he likes the camera where in all of his tree stand locations. And don't get me wrong, like I'll still, just like everything else, I'm always trying new things. I'm always testing new things. So, there are times where I'll try that, but for the most part, it just kind of goes against my instinct as a hunter. I don't really want intrusion where, where I think I'm going to get the shot. I might, the scenario where I will say that I do put them where I might hunt would be more in like a travel corridor, like a rut travel corridor. Okay. During the rut, I think you can get away with more. It's much more sensitive when you're hunting a buck kind of more in his secure area, his bedding area, where he feels safe. Those are the areas I don't want cameras. And that seems to be where a lot of my kills happen.
Yeah.
But during the rut, like in a travel route, yeah, I'd have one there for sure. And then a lot of times I'll put cameras in those spots and just let them soak all year, right, and just keep it as like a learning tool. Is this a spot I want to invest some time in? Mm-hmm. Oh man, look, I'm going through these pictures. Late October was on fire. I do that a lot with my cameras. So it's more for information for years to come, or you can eliminate that area, off or whatever. So I won't say I never put them where I hunt, but those sensitive areas where I seem to kill my oldest deer, I don't put cameras there.
So speaking of going in or staying out of these sensitive areas, what's your cutoff period? Like when does off season, or maybe it doesn't, maybe you never have this, I don't know. I feel like everyone has a different time period when they say, okay, I shouldn't be going back into the cover anymore. I shouldn't be hanging stands anymore. I shouldn't be fiddling with cameras anymore because it's time to let it really lay because hunting season is about to come. Like for me, it's always been at a minimum the end of August. It's like, so once summer's done, September is always like leave it untouched. Yeah. And then I'm super duper careful the whole rest of the year. But late August, lots of times I'm finalizing food plots or running around last minute trying to hang my last stand or something. When is that for you?
Well, the sensitive areas I'm talking about, when I'm looking for, like bedding areas and areas where I'm going to try to ambush a buck that's close to his like secure zone, his secure area. I mean, that's all done like in early spring, when the snow melts. I try to get that all done. And then I don't really go back to those spots. Like I try to find all that information in a month period with a ton of scouting. I try to get that all squared away.
Now, a lot of you guys are familiar with the old hunting tradition of eating, some organ, the heart or a chunk of liver off the first animal you kill. I had that when I was a little kid, and it was a big deal. Organ meats were always prized by frontier people who knew the importance of getting a lot of different minerals and nutrients. And as often is the case, those guys were onto something, because organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. And you can get the same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil, made exclusively from regeneratively raised, grass-fed, and finished cattle. Heart and Soil's unique freeze-drying process means all those important nutrients are trapped in, ensuring you experience every one of the benefits of nature's superfood in a clean, convenient, taste-free capsule. Find out more at heartandsoil.co. And make sure to use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase. That's heartandsoil.co. Use the code MeatEater. There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store, or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today.
And then I want to stay out of there. The other spots, like, if I'm looking more towards like a rut, a rut type setup or something like that, those are the ones that now tend to seem like, we're busy. They kind of, you want to get them done in the spring, but now it's like the beginning of summer and they're still not done.
Yeah.
Or there's still more spots to prep or to scout out. Those are the spots that I don't mind pushing back a little bit, because November is still a long ways away and it's not as sensitive as an area, but even with those, I'd say August. Yeah, by August, I don't want to be in there. I feel like I feel like during I don't know. When you get that late in the game, I feel like every time you go in, I just cringe. I get that feeling. I'm just ruining my chances here. I'm decreasing my chances. So I like to hang back as much as possible and get things done, quick and early if I can. But you can only do what you can do. Everybody's super busy, and I'm just like the rest of the guys. I find myself, late summer, like, oh crap, trying to get these. But I try to prioritize those sensitive areas, those areas where I get 80% of my kills first, early in the spring. Get those done. Those are the most important. Those are those are my bread and butter. These other areas, because they're the rut, they're going to pick up late October, first 2 weeks of November. Those are the ones that I'm okay with getting to now or in July or early August.
And we need to take one more break here to thank our partners at Whitetail Properties. And I was just checking out their YouTube channel here recently. One of the many resources they have, in addition to lots on their website at whitetailproperties.com, but their YouTube channel, it's got this Land Beat video series, and the most recent video is all about it's really a quick example about how to develop a bow hunting food plot, and showing you a specific scenario where this land specialist is trying to map out how he's going to break up a larger field into two smaller sections using a food plot screen. which is something that I really, really recommend. It's something I use a lot. I just spent a whole lot of time planting some food plot screens myself. So check out this video. It's on the Whitetail Properties YouTube channel. The video is called Bow Hunting Food Plots, Get Deer Within Bow Range. Quick one, helpful to see it, and I think you can use it as an example of how you might be able to do this in your own area. And how much, how is your prep changing at all with, and I know you've kind of used saddles throughout different periods of your hunting time period, but I think you're maybe using saddles a little more now than you were seems like you went a little bit of like you're using a bunch, then you went back to stands a little bit.
Yep.
Now maybe you're back to using saddles a little bit. That's kind of changing how I think about how I'm going to set up some of my farms, because I'm not going to be hanging stands now. So I'm trying to decide, okay, do I just want to prep a handful of trees? Do I want to prep a bunch of trees? What does your preparation look like when you're considering a saddle?
Yeah. Not much different, to be honest with you, because I was never the type that like hung stands and left them. Every area I hunt, other people hunt. So there's the competition out there. So I was always the guy that, bring my stand in, take my stand out. With the saddle, so I'm kind of the same way. I do prep a lot of spots, but what I notice now is as I get older and I guess my style and everything kind of gets more dialed in, I prepare less. I prepare the spots where I really feel like I can kill something. Not like, oh, this might be a good spot, or oh, I might be able to call a deer in here, or if a buck, does come through here, I want to have a tree ready to go. A lot of those ones I don't do anymore. And if those things pop up, I just do like a run and gun type setup. But I make sure those spots you come across that you're just like, oh man, like this is where the big buck's living. Okay, now where can I hunt him?
Yep.
Where can I get in? Okay, I'm going to be accessing here. I'm going to need this type of wind. Like, how close can I get to this without him busting me? He can't smell me. He can't see me. He can't hear me. How close can I get to this spot without any of those things happening? So then what I do is, I'll get in there and I'll look out and I'll listen and I'll try to figure out where that is. It might be, if it's a little more rolling terrain, I might be able to get just over a rise or something. If it's real thick, I might be able to get in, even closer. It just depends. And then I got to take into account how noisy is it? Is this a spot I can clear out a little bit, or is it a spot that I'm, not allowed to do that? So all that stuff comes into account, but I spend a lot of time in those locations because I want it to be perfect. You know what I mean? So, those ones, those types of scenarios and that type of situation, those are the ones that I take the most time with. I prioritize and I get those done and out of the way.
And are you actually do you trim out shooting lanes and stuff on those spots? Like, do you have your perfect tree picked out? Do you put pegs in it or anything else? Or is it, hey, I'm still going to bring my saddle and sticks in or something, I'll climb up. But what other prep do you do that point other than figuring it all out in your head?
Yeah. So if it's like, if it's a spot that I've been to for, an area I've been to for years, and I kind of know that, know the area, and I already have my spots kind of picked out, that stuff, it might be a scenario where I just kind of go in, climb up the tree and trim. There's not too many spots anymore where I like leave stuff up like sticks or pegs or anything like that. It just hasn't worked out for me. So most of that stuff, I like to kind of be invisible. Those spots where I share with other hunters, it just like, I feel like if they know where you're at, they just tend to gravitate towards it. Mm-hmm. So I try to leave no trace. But yeah, I'll go in those and I'll trim those spots. Some of the spots, like when we're hunting like public land or something, we're not really allowed to do much trimming. So, those scenarios you just try to work with best you can. But a lot of times, yeah, if it's a sensitive area though, if it's close to in a secure zone where that buck, I think like he'll feel safe, I'll try to do as minimal trimming as possible. I don't want to make it look like I was there. Just, a few holes. Hopefully I don't have to do too much. Hopefully it's not so thick like you can't get an arrow. If it's so thick you can't get arrows anywhere, then I'm getting on the edge of it. I'm not going to go in there and create all these freaking highways of shooting lanes in there. It's just not going to work out for you.
Yeah.
But I'll get on the edge of it. And usually if it's that thick, the deer will feel comfortable moving through that, and you might be able to catch them on the edge. That's a lot of times I run into that scenario where it is so thick in there. It's like, man, how, like, yeah, you could get up there, but you get up, 15 feet, but you look down, you can't get an arrow in anywhere. And that's where a lot of times where those big bucks like to be.
Yep.
So if you see that, I don't try to make that situation work for me. I get on the edge where I feel like he'll make that mistake, and that, that one day when the timing and everything's perfect, he'll make it to that edge.
Yep.
So that's kind of what I bank on. But then there's those other scenarios where, it's just the way you can come in on a low creek or something, and you got the water running and it's creating some noise, or some windy conditions or something, or wet conditions. And you can get I can almost get within bow range of these bucks sometimes. It just depends on the terrain and the situation. Yeah. There's some spots that I've been in that if you can get to that tree and you can get up perfectly, you can get up and you can actually see the deer.
Yeah.
And that doesn't happen often, or that that bed's 50 yards away and it's like, oh man, he's not there. I guess he's not in there tonight. And then it's like 10 minutes of shooting, you see him stand up and stretch. I mean, that's such a cool feeling.
Yeah, but
so it just depends. Everything, every scenario is a little different. So I spend a lot of time in those areas. And I really try to think about all of that. How is this going to play out? How could this play out? Where are the areas that if I come in this way, could he see me there? Like I'm down in the bed, kneeling down. Could he see me there? Well, then I'll pick out an access and I might walk it, and I'll be like, is this too noisy? Can I get away with this? Am I going to need windy conditions to do this? Am I going to need wet? There's spots where that I need wet or windy to get in, and I save those spots. So if I can get 30 or 40 of those types of locations through sufficient preparation and sufficient hard work, trying to find those spots over years and years, and just keep building on those. If you prepare to that level, how can you not have success?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? How can I not? That's the way I look at it. I'm not going to succeed on every one.
Yeah.
That buck's not going to show up. This buck's going to get killed by another hunter. This buck's going to come out, and get downwind to me somehow and win me. The wind's going to switch and get me, on this deer, but this one I'm going to get, and then I feel like, the more you kind of feel confident in your system, and the more experience you have, all those things that can go wrong and those scenarios that can go wrong, you almost can almost foresee them, and you can really minimize them.
Yep.
So I can get into an area, I can see, because I've made the mistake before, I can see this isn't going to work. I need to back up. Yep. I need to be out a little bit, or I need to be a little bit closer. He's not going to get to me here.
Yep.
Or the wind's going to swirl here. This is the perfect, just that big 9 I killed a couple years ago. I hunted that deer for 2 years in the area where all the signs said I needed to be. I had pictures of him there. There was several scrapes. It was a nice open area with tall weeds, with oak trees. And it was just this open area inside of a woods along a river bottom, and the surrounding cover was real thick. So it's just oh man, he's going to feel great coming into this opening. It's perfect. But the wind swirled like crazy, and I hunted it, and I got up there and I'm throwing milkweed, and it's the wind, the wind's coming out of the north, but my milkweed's flying south. Why? Maybe it's just switching today. So then I come back again, a couple weeks later or whatever, it's coming out of the north. Boom, it's going back south. Why is it doing that? What's wrong with this weatherman? You know what I mean? This app is saying north wind. It's not. It took me a while. It's swirling here. I'm getting a swirling effect, and it's coming into that opening, shooting down and blowing right back.
Yeah.
So what did I have to do? I figured that out through trial and error, and I backed off 100 yards, and I ended up killing the deer the first sit.
Yeah.
And there was at least 2 times where that deer was coming in on previous years to that opening, and he winded me.
Wow.
And I'm sure of it because it came from the same direction. I never did lay eyes on him, but he came from that same direction out of the bed where I killed him. And he came in, and it was one of those, when you hear a big giant deer like snort, it's like, it's a different sound.
Yeah.
And then you hear it bound away, and it's like,
yeah,
okay, that's not a light deer.
Yep. A single deer, heavy thump.
Yeah.
You're like, shit.
Yep.
I know it just happened.
Yep. It happened to me twice. So, and, it was just that little adjustment. So now I know if I find an opening in the woods like that looks awesome, I need to get up and test what the wind's doing.
Yeah.
Because I've already made a mistake. I hunted a deer 2 years in a situation like this, and it doesn't work.
Yep.
You got to find, sometimes you find that perfect tree, and it's like, man, this is the tree. And you're checking, seeing what the wind's doing. It's just not working for you. And you might have to pick that other tree that's not so perfect, but the wind's perfect for you.
So a lot of what you're discussing there, though, comes from having years worth of experience because you've scouted these places so extensively, you've hunted them, you know some spots. What if I threw you into this scenario, which a lot of people happen to find themselves in at some time or another? Let's say it's you lost your previous places to hunt. You have no other places to hunt now. You lost permission everywhere. There's no public land where you live, let's say. But you get permission on a new farm. It's the only spot you're going to hunt, let's say, or at least for the sake of this discussion. You get permission on a new 80-acre piece. You get permission on August 1st. What do you do if you have to start all of your preparation on August 1st for this property? And walk me through your mindset. Walk me through what you're doing from the moment you get permission. Like your house, you got the permission. Let's say you talked to them before, and then they give you a call and say, "Yep, okay, yeah, you got it." Now okay, now for the next 30 days, whatever, I got to get ready. Talk me through from the very beginning what you're thinking about, what you're looking at, how you're breaking things down, to then what you actually do once you get into the field and what you're doing over the next couple weeks.
Okay. Well, it's funny because in 2001, I had the same exact scenario. In a farm not far from here. Actually, I got permission. It was even later than that. It was like September, like mid-September.
Wow.
And so I had gotten permission, immediately got out my, back then we didn't have Onyx. It was just, like my paper map. I think I got down from like the city building in Jackson, but I looked at the aerial, just kind of got the lay of the land. And from very early on, like I have always gravitated towards I think early on, I got on nice deer because I always went towards the thickest stuff. It was just like, okay, I saw a nice deer come out of the thickest stuff. It just made sense to me early.
Yeah.
So, there was a river bottom coming through this area, and then there was these little points kind of coming off, and this tall marsh grass, and these lone trees kind of along the river bottom, and it's that was the thickest area. Everything else was open hardwoods or field. So it just gravitated towards that spot. So I went out there just scouting, and I walked in the field that was butted up right next to that was standing corn, and I walked around the edge. I was just walking the perimeter of the corn, and then right as I was approaching that thick area right off the cornfield where there's all that marsh grass, and then you go a little further and there's all these lone trees along this river bottom, in thick, tall marsh grass. There's a couple sets of big buck tracks coming out of that stuff into the standing corn, and I'm like, whoa, So I didn't even bother walking into that stuff. It's season's coming up in a week, right? A week or two. So what I did is I backed up and I found the closest tree that I could get to where they were entering that field. And, back then it was just I always felt thick cover to thick cover is good. Standing corn is thick cover. I felt they're coming through here. I feel like I got a chance. There's really no other option. Once you get off the cornfield, you have to get a ground setup or something. So I found the closest tree that I could get to that transition, and I sat on October 1st, and I had at that time, the two biggest Michigan bucks I've ever seen come out together in a bachelor group. I had my choice between the two.
Jeez.
Both of them over 150 inches.
Wow.
Yep. And
where exactly was this?
So, well, it was funny. It was where your buddy Andy helped me with the dog.
Oh, right there.
That other buck. So,
Nice.
But anyway, so the two bucks come out. One was substantially wider than the other. It was like 19 inches wide. They're both kind of similar caliber. I ended up shooting the wider one. But going back to your question, if I got permission in August, I feel like August, if I wanted to really learn the property, I might do like a quick burn through everything. August, I still think you're okay. If it was, September 15th, September 20th, I think I would play it different. But August, I feel like that's, early enough that I would probably get a quick burn through. I definitely would look at the maps and pick out like, okay, this looks like it could be good bedding here. Okay, we got a waterway here. There's some water. There's a nice little pond or, a drinking hole here. I might do a quick burn through the thickest, area, just the farm in general, and get a quick.
And so when you say do a burn through of it, so you mentioned you're going to look at the maps, find a couple like interesting areas. And then when you do this quote unquote burn through, are you saying you're literally going to like grid it, or are you just going to go hit like these 4 or 5 spots of most interest? And like, I'm actually interested in like, how much do you actually walk?
Yeah. I would,
how focused is that walk?
Yeah, it would depend on the farm, but I would focus on the areas of interest.
Okay.
I'm not going to grid the whole farm necessarily. Say your typical Michigan farm, it's going to have some field, probably some woods, maybe some river bottom or marsh or whatever. I'm going to focus on the areas that I know are going to typically hold mature deer. And most guys nowadays, I think, can look at a map and kind of pinpoint some of those areas. But for me, even though I'm decent at doing that with a map, I'm much better getting boots on the ground, because when I get boots on the ground, there's just things you miss. Yeah. You can get into a good area from a map, but once I get on the ground, that's when I really kind of see it, and I could see how everything kind of plays out in my mind, and what the deer are doing, and what's the caliber of deer in here. Does this place hold a deer that can get to 4 or 5 years old? The whole picture is in front of you, and then depending on what you see, just kind of you can figure things out. But I wouldn't be afraid if it's August, kind of doing a speed scout, I guess, like through that area, just verifying some deer sign. Okay, yeah, this does look thick. This looks good. Maybe even. If it was one of those situations where I could like hang stands or something, I might throw up some stands or whatever. Talking about your average guy that might be in this situation, and just try to get it all done like boom, really quick, and then get out. It's not something I would do like, oh, okay, let's go scout it. Sweet, let's come back next weekend and hang our ladder stands.
Yeah,
cool. Next week, let's come out and put our mineral licks in. Awesome. You know what I mean? Like. That's what's going to burn you. But especially like that time of year, like bucks are much more laid back, and they're much more laid back when they're in the group too. So you can get away with, going through summer. Typically there's a lot of activity anyway, with humans. So I wouldn't be terrified to do that. It wouldn't be my favorite thing. I'd still get that cringe.
Yeah.
But I would do what I needed to do to get it done very quickly.
That's a really good point.
And then just stay out. Now, if we're talking, say, mid-September, like the time frame I found myself in, then I'm going to scout more of the edges. I'm not going to go into that thick stuff. Now, I'd do exactly what I did that other farm. I'd walk the field edges. Okay, now maybe there's some open woods. Okay, I feel comfortable walking in open woods. Okay, now it's starting to get thick. Okay, I'm going to look at my map. There's a point here that goes out into this marsh. That's definitely going to be a bedding area. So I'm not even going to mess with it. I'm going to assume that is what it looks like, or here's this island here, in this marsh with all these, these kind of like brushy trees. That looks like a good bedding area. I'm not even going to verify it. It's on the map. There it is. That's pretty straightforward. Just kind of walk the edges and walk the fringes. And then, when I find something that looks like it might be a good setup, it might be something I would prep, or it might be something like, okay, we're a little too close. I'm going to do a run and gun, and I'm going to set it up the first time I hunt it, and then kind of go from there. Like I've done that in the past too. It's more like a kind of less aggressive. You're learning the property. You're just not learning it intimately. Yep. And you're going to learn it intimately throughout the season.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense. I get that. So what about we've talked about preparing our archery situation. We've talked about actually learning a property and getting a hunting plan in place. What else are you prepping or taking care of, or what kind of routine do you have around the final days before your hunting season starts? Maybe it's that last week or the last night or whatever it might be for you. What are those things that you're doing at the very end just before it's go time?
Yeah, those last 2 weeks, those are really, really key for me. That's when I'm trying to find the buck that I'm going to try to kill opening day. And there's always one that I'm going to try to kill opening day. And, with all this preparation and, all the scouting, you kind of narrow down, to certain areas that, I look for, areas that always hold good deer. And then I'm also looking for deer that I know that have made it and their locations. And I'm also looking for deer that I found through scouting. So now I'm trying to find a buck that's showing some sort of weakness coming up to those last couple days before the season. And I'm not trying to be too intrusive. I'm not going to go in there and necessarily check a camera. I might, if the conditions, are good, if we get a good rain or something and my camera's off of where, I might do that. I might go in there and see like, oh man, here's a picture of him at 8, half an hour before or after dark.
Yep.
Okay. Now I feel confident. I know where he's at because I've scouted. I know where the beds are.
Yep.
I feel like I can get in, I could run and gun, or maybe I already have a tree prepped or something, but I feel like I can slip in there. The conditions are right. I usually make some sort of move on a deer that first day of the season. And some of them are like, it's clear, like, okay, this deer is moving, he's in the area, he's living here. And it feels more of like I won't say a sure thing, but like a real confidence is really high.
Sure.
And then there's other ones where like, okay, he was here, I glassed him coming into this field a few weeks ago, or maybe a week ago, and I haven't seen him since. I checked the camera, he's not on there, but that might be my best lead. And I've learned to never just because they're not on camera or you don't see them coming in the field anymore, it doesn't mean they're not there. There's some shifting around that goes in that late summer. You'll have some deer that stay, some deer that leave, and you won't see them again till like December. And then there's those some deer that come in, but that's why that last week and a half is really key, because by that time they're usually there.
Yeah.
And so I'm just trying to find that one scenario where it looks like looks like I can get an early season kill. And it's my favorite time. And I've killed quite a few deer there, but it's by no means is it like 100% thing. It's just, that's my goal for opening day. I want to be on a buck. I want to know where he's at. I want to have a real high confidence setup. And I feel like if I prepare enough and I, spread my scouting enough and try to locate enough big deer that I can find one or maybe even two that are showing some sort of weakness or where I feel like I got a chance there.
So at that point, so you've had your wide net cast throughout the summer.
Yep.
And then sometime in late summer, early fall, you're kind of saying, okay, here's my 5 mature bucks, or there's 10 mature bucks, or there's 3 mature bucks, or whatever. And then now you're getting to that last week or two before the season. Do you then look at the information you have so far and then say, okay, of these 5 bucks on the various properties I can hunt, I think buck number 1 is going to give me the very best chance for the opening night kill? And then do you zoom in all of your focus just on that one deer then and spend the last 2 weeks doing some glassing there or doing a couple camera pulls or something? Like, do you focus in on that one deer, or are you still looking at everything because your number 1 October 1st buck might change?
Yeah. It usually things start playing out where, like, you know, deer start disperse. Like, you know, you might seeing this buck coming out, and, you know, it's like mid-September, and all of a sudden, like, okay, he's gone, you know. So he's kind of, things start falling off, like things start playing out where it just kind of narrows you down.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's just some deer. And to be honest with you, a lot of spots I hunt aren't great for early season, you know, holding a buck early season, but there are some. I do have some that every year hold a good buck. So you know, I tend to focus on those areas, but I'm also trying to always find new areas that are like that. There's some areas that are just literally that first week is like your chance. And if you don't get it done, then it's not one of those spots you want to wait till the rut, because they're gone. The crops come out and there's nothing there anymore.
Yep.
It just doesn't have enough security cover for the deer to feel safe and confident there. So they're gone. It's more of like a late summer, early fall thing. So it's real important to recognize that and then capitalize on those spots, you know, when they're most effective. So I do have a handful of areas like that, and I'm constantly adding some. So yeah, I'm zeroing in on those. Just this year, there's a new area that looked like it could, just going by experience, it looked like it could be decent early. There's some apple trees on there, and they hold some water, and I'm thinking it might be good thick cover. It could be a really good area for a mature deer early season. So there's another spot for me to kind of keep tabs on. But things tend to play out, and your focus tends to narrow naturally to, like, okay, this deer is doing this, you know, and he's showing up, or he's shown some regularity, or last year he was, you know, regular during this time of year. So it all kind of, you know, it all comes into play. Just, you tend to narrow down. I'm not necessarily, just because there's a big giant, you know, here in velvet, that I'm just going to be ultra focused on that deer. I won't do that, because, you know, there's 50% chance that he might go somewhere else. Like that buck that you helped me track, you know, that deer was never there early season.
Yeah.
You know, he never was. He was, in fact, I've told you this, the play was to kill him late season.
Right.
That's when he always came. And so I wasn't even after that deer. I was there after a big wide 10 point. And for whatever reason, I mean, who knows, you know, call it luck, you know, fate, whatever. He showed up, you know, early season. So
that was a heck of a buck too.
Yeah. I wanted to bring him. I wanted to show
really
him.
Cool.
Yeah. But, you know, so, you know, I tend to just, it usually ends up being like 1 or 2 bucks, and it's Michigan. I mean, sometimes it's 1, sometimes it's, I've had years where I've literally found like 2 shooters, period.
Yeah. And
then other years where it's been like 7 or 8.
Yeah.
You know, and it's just, it kind of depends on the year, and, you know, if it's been a good growing season, you know, what deer have been killed, what haven't, you know, it's just, you know, like a few years ago, every deer that I had on camera that was 3.5 or older, which was, or that I had seen, which was a lot. There was a lot for Michigan. It was the most I'd ever seen. Every single one except one was verified killed.
Wow.
Yeah. So we went into that next season like, okay, there's not going to be much around, you know, but then, you know, then there's years it's like, you know, you're glassing, and there's like, man, there's some good bucks there, and you know, big tracks here when I'm scouting, and it's like, then you pull your card, and there's a couple shooters, you know, at this place and this place, and it's like, wow, there's a lot of nice deer around.
Yeah.
And they tend falling off, pressure increases here, they disappear, this deer gets poached, this deer gets killed, you know, things happen, and it ends up narrowing down, but you know, it just kind of depends. But usually that last week, I'm usually focused on like 1, maybe two deer.
Yeah.
You know,
what are you doing in those final days or weeks as far as preparing other stuff? So other than you found your buck or bucks that you're going to target that first night, Do you do anything to prep your gear? Do you do anything to prep your mind? I don't know. Any process stuff that's happening at home before the season actually begins?
I mean, the gear stuff is just kind of as I can do it throughout the year, like here and there. I don't necessarily designate a certain time for that. I try to get all my equipment quiet. I like a real reliable system. So like in my pack, everything is always where, has its own little pocket or station, and it just, everything's where I need it to be. I don't want to be fumbling around with stuff.
What was it that you forgot on our Nebraska hunt?
My rangefinder.
Oh yeah, the range. That was it. I forget.
I've never done that before, ever. Yeah.
The system got messed up with the trip, and that came.
It totally
did.
And it was like, I remember gathering stuff out of the back of your car, and it was like, I had a bag over here, my backpack over here, and I was like, where is everything? Like, this is completely messed up.
Uh-huh.
And I was wearing a bino harness, and I had my rangefinder clipped onto my bino harness, and I grabbed everything, hopped out of your truck, and didn't grab the bino harness. So I didn't have my binoculars or that. And I started walking, and I get up that first hill, and I'm like, oh, like grabbing my chest, and I turn around and I see your truck going over the hill. And I'm like, Mark, So it was just like, I knew nothing good was going to happen that night.
Yeah. But sorry, back to what you were saying about your system.
Yeah, the equipment stuff, again, just like with everything else, I'm trying to improve the system. I'm trying to find gear that's quieter, gear that's that makes things lighter, less bulky, makes me more effective in the woods. And I like the system I have, so I guess I haven't been changing too much. I used to use a lone wolf and sticks, which is great. I still have them. It's a really nice, like, mobile type setup, which a lot of my hunting is. And I have gravitated more towards like the tree saddle. I had one a long time ago, a trophy line. Used it for 2 seasons, killed deer out of it, no problem. It just wasn't real comfortable for me. And when I started having my back issues and stuff, I just got away from it. It just wasn't comfortable. I felt fidgety. There was one hunt in Ohio that I was like, I was going to sit till noon. I had till noon to hunt. I was going to sit till noon. It was like November 4th. And it got to 10 o'clock, and I couldn't stand the pain anymore.
Wow.
In my hips. And I got down, and I was like, I can't. I can't risk not sitting 10 to 12 during the rut when I have that time available.
Mm-hmm.
So then I went back to the tree stand, which, definitely wasn't comfortable, but at least I could stand, sit, just kind of keep things loose. And then, in the past couple of years, all these, new saddles have come out, and they're so much better than what they were.
Yeah.
And I was able to try out one that I really liked, and it was so light, no bulk to it. And they came out with a little back band, so I'm able to find really good comfort in it too now. So that I kind of got into that like mid last season, and then I used that exclusively, and then that's going to be my go-to this year too. They've made just so much improvements on it, so that's a big gear change. But everything else is just about getting it quiet. I'm happy with my clothes and boots and that sort of thing. Like sometimes I'll try like new boots and that sort of thing, but I don't spend a whole lot of energy on that. Like everything I have is like pretty freaking quiet. And what I like about, having quiet stuff and like the saddle with less bulk and everything, it's like, I like that I can go into the woods, run and gun in a new area, and I'm perfectly capable and ready to climb up a tree and hunt 25 feet, or I can hunker down on the ground and I don't have a stand or anything noisy to worry about. And if I see a buck bedded with a doe out there, I can crawl and stalk with it. I mean, I have everything I need to do that. Like if I had a climbing tree stand or a stand with sticks that weighs 24 pounds, you know what I mean? I don't know. It just really fits my style. So that's really been the only big gear change, but I'm always trying to like just kind of dial things in and just get things quieter, eliminate anything that could go wrong, and just have everything really reliable. Like if I want my handsaw, boom, I know right where it's at. If I want, my bottle of water, boom, I know where it's at. If I want my wind checker, boom, I know it's in this pocket. Like I don't want to be like, digging around in my, causing extra moving up in the tree stand. I want everything to be right where I need it. Even like the way I hang my bow and everything is just so dialed in. It's always the same. You know what I mean?
Yep.
I want everything the same.
This goes right back to what we talked about in a lot of these other episodes. It's like the power in like having these set routines and habits, because it keeps you from having to spend precious energy on all these things that just have to get done and get done. If you have a system in place, that frees your mind up to focus on the stuff that you really need to focus on, like how to adapt to the changing variables, or something brand new happens. You got to figure out where's the buck going to be, or how's my plan going to change, or where should I be hunting. That kind of stuff is what your brain power should be focused on, versus 20 different little decisions about where to hang my bow and what's going to be in my backpack and where's my gear going to be in the morning when I wake up to go to the truck. Like having all those things lined out the way you do, I think is just a perfect way to eliminate error, find those little inches, let you spend your energy and time on the big stuff that that you have that skill to do, and now you get the mental space to do it too.
Yeah, there was somebody, I don't remember who it was, but I don't know if I read it in a book or online or something, but it was something that I read a few years ago, and it said something like, when you have a choice to choose the difficult thing or the easy thing, always choose the difficult thing. So I always try to do that now. So like if there's a tree stand that's a mile away, or this one here that's 400 yards away, I'm going to choose the one that's a mile away. Or like you said, you wake up in the morning and you don't feel like going. Like I have those mornings too. I usually get up and go to the gym. I actually do enjoy doing that, but like sometimes you just don't feel like doing it. But then I'll okay, I don't feel like doing it. I'm doing it.
Yeah.
And now it's just like, I always just choose the harder thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So now it's like, it's just kind of the way I live. I'm sure I choose the easiest thing sometimes, but I guess when it comes to this type of stuff and being the best I can be and improving in hunting and trying to stay in shape and anything like that, it's just like, okay, if it's the harder thing, that's what I want to do.
It's usually the best choice. It's just hard to do it.
Yeah.
And this is where I want to leave things. What is going through your mind the last night before hunting season opens? Your first hunt's in the morning. You're laying in bed at night. Lights are off. It's quiet. What are the final things that you're thinking about before the hunting season begins?
Usually that's a pretty calm and relaxed time for me, because I know that I've done everything I could have done to be prepared.
Yep.
There's usually a deer that, I'm onto, that I have fairly high confidence in having a decent hunt the next day. It's usually a very peaceful time for me. One thing I do, not just that day, I actually do this every night unless I just kind of fall asleep before I do it. I started doing this when after I kind of got through the target panic thing, but before I go to bed, I'll go through one scenario. I'll go through a deer that I've shot, a deer that I haven't, or that I shot at and screwed up, and then a completely made up one. And I close my eyes and I visualize this encounter. So I'll close my eyes and I'll visualize a deer that I shot that comes in, exactly what he's doing, exactly how he did it. And I'll come to full draw and I'll settle the pin and I'll let it float, and I'll just focus on executing the shot and making that perfect shot and seeing that arrow, disappear right where I want it to hit. So I'll relive those moments that were successful. And then I'll do the same thing with one that I screwed up on, one that I missed, one that I hit and wounded, those ones that really kind of eat at you. So I'll replay that exactly how it played out, and I'll make that perfect shot again, right behind the shoulder, and see that arrow disappear. And then I'll just make up a new one, a brand new one. Whether it's an elk, an antelope, a whitetail, whatever, and just visualize that. And I've been doing that now for, I don't know, like 8 or 9 years, and I try to do that every night. But usually like, before the hunting season, that night before is this like it's kind of like a kind of rest, peaceful. I feel like I'm prepared. But at the same time, excited. And it's now that I think about it, it's kind of it's a peaceful feeling, but it's also a bit of an anxious feeling because I know the next few months are going to be a lot of commitment, a lot of hard work, a lot of hours in the stand. It's like a nervous, like anxious kind of excitement, but I feel very peaceful and content of my preparation. If that makes sense.
It does.
Okay.
Absolutely makes sense. I can relate to that.
Yeah.
And I feel like listening to all this, you prepare like a pro. Like there's a book, and I haven't read the book, but I read the prequel to this book, and I've read a lot of things from this person, and he talks about going pro with something. How there's a difference between having a hobby versus taking something so serious as if you were a professional at it, even if you're not really a professional.
Yeah.
But when you make decisions and when you prepare and when you put the heart and soul and commitment into something as if it was what you made your living from, that's how people really excel at something. And maybe, just could be something you're really excited and passionate about and you want to excel in it. So you make those pro decisions. And I think the types of decisions you're making, choosing to do the hard things, choosing to be preparing all throughout the year, focusing on the minutia, focusing on the little steps, quantifying how to get better at things. I think that's how you prep like a pro. And I think it shows, obviously, with your results. So for people out there who want to get better at hunting or whatever, they don't necessarily need to do all the things like you do, right? Like you said, like it works for you. It might not be for everybody. But I think everyone can learn from you with the process you take, the level of attention you pay to the different steps in that process. I think that's a really big takeaway. And it's helpful for me and encouraging to me. Well, not encouraging. Makes me feel lazy, but it's inspiring me to do better than I do because I feel like I do a whole hell of a lot. But there's room to get better, and it's good to hear from people that can push you. And I think you set an example that can push us. So thanks for sharing that, man.
Yeah, there's always room to get better for everybody. And the worst thing, like what I hate seeing too, is like guys that are successful, anything, but let's just kind of focus on deer hunting. Guys that, have had years and years of success that kind of get stuck in their ways. Mm-hmm. And you could tell they're not getting better. And in fact, they sometimes they see other guys that are having success and they like to almost like put those guys down.
Yep.
Because they do it differently. And, man, I don't know. That's just really disheartening to see that, guys that have like really reached this high level, something that they've, dedicated, their lifetime to, only to put down a guy that's equally successful that just does it a little bit different way. I don't get it. And my goal is I just want to continue to learn. I don't want the greatest wall of all time. I don't want, a bigger buck than you or a bigger buck than my buddies or anybody else. I want to continue learning and I want to get the better. It's more of like a competition with myself.
Yeah.
I don't know. I would never feel right just being like, okay, you know what? I'm pretty decent at this. We're just going to kind of level it out and go from there and just kind of, kill some nice deer every year. I don't know. I think some people's minds are made different that they just, and it probably has something to do with what you're passionate about and what you love. And for me and you, this is certainly it. So it's just like we have that kind of drive to improve. But I feel like there's something you can learn from everybody. Like I've learned from you and I've learned from some of these guys that I talk about that have had years and years of success. I don't ever want to lose that. Like you can learn from the guy that killed a big buck right down the road.
Yeah.
I always want to hear that story from the guy that didn't know what he was doing.
Right.
Because you're going to learn something from it.
Yeah.
And I always take the time to sit down and talk to those guys. And there's always bits and pieces you can take from those that you can, incorporate into your own knowledge. And, I think can really help you.
I think you are spot on with that one. And we've talked for a long time. I can't believe how long we talked. There was a lot of good stuff in there. So we're going to wrap it up. We'll have to get you back on here again. I know we've got plans to do that. And I know we've been talking about some plans. Maybe we can try to do a hunt again this fall.
Yeah, that'd be
I think
good.
we should.
Me
All right.
too.
Let's talk again soon.
All right.
And that's going to do it. Hope you enjoyed this episode. And if you did, if you enjoy what Andy had to say, he has a lot more to share. And he's been a guest on the podcast several different times over the past few years. So go back through the Wired Hunt podcast archives, look up Andy May. He's a good friend, a really, really good deer hunter, and someone who I think has a particular knack for sharing what he does and how he does it in a way that that can help people, and that I think is not intimidating. It's easily consumed, which is why I've learned so much from him too. So take a look at those other episodes, enjoy them, enjoy your weekend, enjoy your day, and as we've been talking about, there's lots to be doing. So hopefully you're out there in the field practicing with your bow, or hanging tree stands, or planting food plots, or doing something to get ready for hunting season, because before you know it, it's gonna be here. So until then, stay wired to hunt.
I'm sure a lot of you guys remember the old ceremonial hunting tradition of eating the heart out of the first animal you killed. Meat from those organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. You can get those same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil. Find out more at heartandsoil.co. And remember, use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase. You ever get that feeling the walls closing in, the concrete jungle suffocating you? You crave some wide open spaces, the chance to connect with nature, maybe in a spot all your own. Well, head over to land.com. They've got ranches, forests, mountains, streams, you name it. Search by acreage. You can search by location. You can search by the kind of hunting and fishing you're dreaming of. Land.com. It is where the adventure begins.